Halito Chimachukma, this is Chief Steve coming at y'all with another episode of True Story. We got a really interesting one for you guys today, but before we get into it, make sure you guys hit that like button. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you're new. Ring that notification bell as well, so whenever I drop these bombs, you'll be the first ones to grab them. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. Now that Juneteenth has passed, a lot of folks were out celebrating, smiling, dancing, buying red soda water, and wearing shirts with fists and flags. But here on True Story, we didn't stop at the surface. We went digging. We looked at the land, the bloodline, and the erasure. And what we uncovered tells a whole different story. Because Juneteenth wasn't just about freedom. It was about the final stamping out of sovereign identity, particularly for those who were never slaves to begin with. It was about the military enforcement of U.S. power in territories still holding on to indigenous ways of life, specifically in Galveston, Texas. And if you didn't know by now, Galveston was once the territory of a powerful and nearly forgotten people, the Karankawa. Before the word Texas was ever spoken, there was a coastal people called the Karankawa, now commonly known as Karankawa or Kawankawa. Their name was changed over time, twisted by Spanish tongues who couldn't pronounce the original word. Their name was changed over time, twisted by Spanish tongues who couldn't pronounce the original word. Karankawa was their true name, spelled Caranchahua. They lived from the Galveston coastline down through Corpus Christi and into southern Texas, thriving on fish, oysters, sea turtles, and game. They were master canoe makers. They were able to navigate through rough waters and shallow bays with ease. They were nomadic, but rooted. You may ask what I mean by that. And what I mean is they moved with the seasons, but they always stood within their ancestral Gulf territory. Just like how you see us as indigenous Aborigines today, we move from place to place. I'm a California Indian. I got roots in Texas. I got roots in Arkansas. And we go back and forth. A lot of our people that's in California go to Texas, set roots there. A lot of people from Texas came out to California. That's what my grandmother did. That's what both of my grandmothers did on my maternal and paternal side. So there's nothing new under the sun. That's what I mean by nomadic, but rooted. They were also fiercely protective, keeping colonizers out of their land for over 300 years. They were described as tall, copper-skinned, muscular, and broad-shouldered, often standing over 6 feet tall. European invaders feared them. And that's because, compared to us, the indigenous copper-colored Aborigine of America, Europeans were really small in stature. The Karankawa painted their bodies, pierced their lips and their nipples with bone and shell. They adorned themselves in feathers and animal hides, not out of savagery, but out of cultural pride and spiritual meaning. But the same colonizers who couldn't beat them on land rewrote their story on paper. By the 1800s, the Karankawa were declared extinct. But what really happened was this. They were reclassified, labeled as Negro, freedmen, or simply erased. Their children were absorbed into the census as Black. Their names were struck from memory, but their blood never left the land. Let's be honest. Most people celebrated Juneteenth this year without ever asking who it was for. They were told it marked the day back in 1865, when the last slaves in Texas were finally freed. That was the headline. But here's what really went down. In June of 1865, Union General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston with federal troops, issuing General Order Number 3, stating that all slaves were now free. But let's break it down. The Civil War was over. Confederate forces had already surrendered. The Emancipation Proclamation had been signed over 2 years prior. So why did it take until June 19th? Because Galveston and the surrounding coast weren't just Confederate strongholds. They were sovereign territories held by descendants of indigenous nations like the Karankawa. The U.S. had to send military force to enforce compliance, not just free people. They weren't delivering good news. They were closing the last chapter on indigenous resistance. And the people being freed, most weren't African imports. They were the children of those very Karankawa warriors. They were the copper-toned originals of the land. You want to know what really bound our people? Not just the whip or the chain, but the pen. The Karankawa weren't lost. They were renamed. They weren't extinct. They were absorbed. By the time Union troops marched through all of Galveston, entire lineages had already been written out of history and written under new names. Names such as Negro, Mulatto, Colored, and yes, Freedmen. That's how you erase a nation without ever shedding blood. And that's how Juneteenth became less of a liberation and more of a branding ceremony. Let me say that again. That is how Juneteenth became less of a liberation and more of a branding ceremony. And what about the slave ships? Another lie that got passed around again this year was the same old myth that our people in the South were all brought here by boat from Africa. Let's set the record straight. The numbers don't add up. The shipping records don't support it. And more importantly, our culture don't match it. Because we were already here. The so-called plantation slaves in Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, many of them were actually descendants of tribal nations like the Karankawa, the Caddo, the Natchez, what we recently found out was called the Nashi, and the Tunica, captives of the Indian Wars, survivors of removal policies who were forced onto cotton fields instead of reservations. They renamed us Africans to sever us from our inheritance? Why do you think some went to reservations and others stayed and sharecropped? Because they knew who the original people were. They renamed us Africans to make sure our children would remember they had a birthright to the soil. This year, they gave you ice cream and t-shirts. They gave you fireworks and hashtags, but they didn't give you the truth. So let me give it to you. Galveston was Karankahoa land. The so-called slaves were indigenous people, reclassified, not imported. Juneteenth was not the beginning of freedom. It was the burial of sovereignty. So now that the smoke has cleared, let's ask some real questions. Who were our people before they were called slaves? Why did they need military force to deliver freedom? Why are we still celebrating captivity dressed as liberty? And most importantly, why do they teach our children to forget while celebrating what they should be remembering? This has been True Story with Chief Steve. We don't just bring the facts here, we resurrect the memory. We see you, Karankahoa. We see you, copper-colored tribes of Turtle Island. And we ain't confused no more. Hey yo, before I go, I wanted to give a huge shout out to Copper Colored King. It's another Aborigine, another Niji in this lane of putting out the true story of our people. Y'all be sure to support the Niji, alright? That's Copper Colored King. Find the tag and tap in. He also did a video on this. Very, very good.